In the quiet heart of a forgotten valley, where olive trees swayed in the breath of dawn and the world still carried the hush of prayer, a young man stood beneath his father's roof, already dreaming of leaving it. The house was not small, nor was the love within it scarce, yet his heart beat restless, hungry for a world beyond fences, for a freedom untested by wisdom. His eyes lingered on the horizon where the hills folded into pale distance, and in those lines he imagined promise. Cities shining with laughter, roads paved with desire, the thrill of being answerable to no one but himself. His father watched him from the doorway, silent, knowing that this look would one day come, as it comes to all who mistake belonging for bondage. The father's hands, worn from years of labor, trembled slightly on the staff he held, but he said nothing. Love often must stand aside while pride learns the hard way. The son approached, hesitant, yet determined, and said the words that would cut through their peace like a blade. "Father, give me my share." The request hung in the morning air, sharp and unnatural, for inheritance was a gift given after death, and in asking, the son declared that he could no longer wait for the rhythm of grace. The father did not argue. He looked into his son's eyes and saw the storm there, saw also the boy he had carried on his shoulders once, the laughter that used to echo through the same courtyards. He turned without a word and divided the wealth, counting not coins, but memories, not livestock, but years of shared breath. The son took what was his, and in that taking severed something invisible. He kissed his father's cheek, a gesture that could not hide the distance already between them, and walked away before the dawn had fully broken. The servants watched from the fields, whispering prayers that he might return, while the father remained still, eyes upon the road that now carried half his heart away. The wind rose softly, carrying dust and silence through the courtyard. The young man walked fast at first, eager to leave behind the weight of expectation. The path was long, winding between hills golden with morning light, and for a while he felt exhilaration, a rush of self-importance, the taste of becoming his own master. The world seemed wide enough for every dream. He passed through villages where strangers smiled without knowing his story, where markets spilled with color and the air sang of possibility. He bought what he wanted, slept where he pleased, spoke freely, laughed loudly. Freedom felt like flight, but beneath the laughter was an emptiness that trailed him like a shadow, an unease he silenced with noise, with faces, with a thrill of motion. Each night, as he lay beneath unfamiliar ceilings, the memory of his father's stillness returned, not accusing, just waiting, and he turned away from it, unwilling to name what it was. The further he went, the louder the world became, and yet, the quieter his heart grew. Still he kept walking, as though distance could drown conscience. He told himself he had been right to leave, that independence was worth any price. And yet, sometimes, as the stars spread over strange skies, he caught himself whispering the name of home. The city greeted him like a festival, lanterns swaying over crowded streets, music spilling from open courtyards, laughter threaded with the clink of cups, and for a time the sun let himself be carried by its brightness, a moth praising the flame. He learned the names of pleasures and spent them as if they were his own. He grew fluent in the grammar of desire, punctuation by impulse, paragraphs of night unbroken by sleep. Friends appeared wherever silver flashed, faces blooming like flowers at dawn and folding at dusk, each voice a mirror telling him he was the center of its story. He believed them because belief felt easier than wisdom. He bought fine garments that draped like approval over his shoulders, tasted wines that promised to fill the hollows no journey could outrun, and pledged loyalties as light as the foam on his cup. Yet beneath the spectacle, he began to feel a subtle gravity pulling at him, a quiet weight that gathered in the pauses between songs, a question forming at the edges of his laughter. What remains when the music stops? He ignored it with another purchase, another feast, another hand taken in the dark. But coins are faithful only to subtraction, and soon his purse thinned like the moon at month's end. He sold a ring for another night of applause. He traded a cloak for an hour of forgetting. The city kept smiling, as cities do when they smell a story's ending. Then the rains failed. The markets, once bright with figs and fish and bread, grew sparse, their colors bleached by scarcity. Prices climbed like walls. Doors that had opened to him with indulgent warmth now stayed closed, guarded by eyes that remembered debts clearer than friendships. Those who had called him brother spoke his name with polite distance, promising to meet tomorrow, or the day after, or never. He laughed as if he didn't mind, but the laughter fell to the ground and broke. Hunger introduced itself with courtesy, then took a chair and would not leave. He found small work by the docks, hauling crates that smelled of salt and rot, his shoulders aching with the weight of commerce that had no place for him. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself many things. At night, he slept in alleys that remembered rain, cradled by the city's cold generosity. He dreamed of a field he once knew, of olive leaves whispering secrets to a kinder wind, and woke with a stone in his chest that no wine could dissolve. When even dock work dried up, he went to the outskirts and begged a farmer for any labor, any wage. The man looked him over, the frayed clothes, the uncalloused hands made hard too late, and shrugged toward a pen where swine rooted through husks. "Feed them," he said, tossing a handful of pay that vanished before it hit the ground. The son nodded, swallowing pride as if it were a stale crust. Among the swine, the smell of his choices rose around him. Sweet, sour, unignorable. He poured the husks, watched the animals crowd and jostle, and felt his stomach answer them with a hollow cry. The pods looked almost edible in that moment. He reached out before snatching his hand back, ashamed, enraged, exhausted. The city murmured behind him, a distant hive, uninterested in its fallen bee. He sank to his knees in the mud that did not care about lineage, tears stinging like salt in a wound he could no longer pretend was not there. A memory, clear as water, came unbidden, his father's hands dividing the inheritance. No blame, no bargaining, only love, taken the shape of a release. He had mistaken that quiet for weakness. Now he saw it as the courage of mercy. The thought broke him open. He pressed his forehead to the rough edge of the trough and whispered a sentence he had never learned in the city. "I am not free. I am empty." The wind moved over the fields like a slow forgiveness he could not yet receive. Night crawled in, and with it, a colder honesty. He counted what remained: a body worn by waste, a name bruised by pride, a hunger louder than shame, and a road that pointed in one direction he did not want to face. He slept badly, if at all, while the swine dreamed without regret. At dawn, the sky bruised purple and then softened, and he rose with it, brittle and strangely light, as if a weight had snapped and fallen away. The sentence returned, different now. I will arise and go to my father, not to reclaim, not to argue, not to explain, only to confess, to beg for the smallest place near the warm edge of home. He rehearsed the words as he walked toward the city's broken gates, each step a subtraction that felt like gain. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. The words trembled but held. In the road, the road, leaned forward as if it had been listening for this sentence all along. He walked for days beneath a sky that seemed to stretch forever, its vastness both promise and punishment. The road wound through empty fields, cracked with drought and memory. Each step tore another thread from his pride, leaving him lighter in the way a tree is light after shedding its leaves. The world had grown wide again, but not with wonder, only silence. His sandals wore thin, the straps fraying like old intentions. Villages blurred past, doors half closed, eyes wary. He no longer looked for kindness. He looked only for direction. Hunger walked beside him now, faithful as a shadow. When he found a stream, he drank greedily, water spilling down his chin, and thought how even mercy tasted different when you no longer felt you deserved it. At night, he lay beneath the stars and whispered his practiced confession into the dark until the words began to sound like prayer. I am no longer worthy. Sometimes the wind answered with the rustle of unseen leaves, as though heaven rehearsed forgiveness before the stage of earth. The farther he went, the more the road began to look familiar. Every bend recalled a childhood errand. Every tree carried the ghost of laughter. He slowed as the landscape softened into the edges of home. Olive groves breathing their green scent into the dusk. The low walls paled in evening light. His heart beat painfully, not with fear but with remembering. He imagined his father as he had left him, still, silent, older. Perhaps that silence had hardened into stone. Perhaps love, once spurned, forgets how to listen. He told himself he would stop at the gate, bow, speak the words, and ask for nothing. Servanthood would be grace enough. Yet beneath the humility, another current moved, one he dared not name. Hope, fragile as the first flame after storm. He crested the final hill, and there, far below, lay the house, the courtyard, the well, the fields turning gold in the last light. He stopped. His throat tightened. The air smelled of wheat and smoke and home. He took one trembling step forward, then another, until his knees weakened beneath the weight of his own heartbeat. And then, movement. A figure running from the house, robes flying, sandals slapping the dust, arms outstretched. The sun froze, unable to breathe. His father was running as no elder man should, running like a child toward the miracle he had been praying into the horizon each morning since loss had stolen his sleep. The sight broke him. He tried to kneel, to form the confession he had memorized through every hungry night. But before a single word escaped, the father's arms were around him, strong, shaking, fierce with joy. The son gasped as the world blurred into the scent of his father's robe, the heartbeat against his cheek, the sound of weeping that was not reproach but relief. He stammered, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the words dissolved into the folds of forgiveness. "Hush," the father whispered. "You were lost, and now you're found." His voice trembled. Laughter and sob tangled in the same breath. The servants, stunned, gathered at the gate as their master, still clutching the ragged boy, called for them to bring robes, Rings, sandals, symbols of belonging resurrected. The son could only cry, each tear washing away a distance that years could not. The father held him tighter, murmuring words the wind carried through the valley. Love does not count how long the road was, only that it led home. The courtyard came alive before the stars had even risen, the hush of astonishment giving way to the sound of preparation. Doors opening, voices calling, laughter breaking like dawn through years of silence. Servants ran to fetch what had been stored away for mourning but now would serve for joy. Lamps were lit one by one until the house glowed like a heart rediscovered. The father's command was simple. Bring the best robe and put it on him. Place a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. Each item restored something the son had thought gone forever: dignity, belonging, the simple grace of being seen. When they brought the robe, its folds heavy with the scent of cedar and oil, the father himself wrapped it around his son's shoulders. It fell across the boy's ragged clothes like dawn over ruin. The ring gleamed faintly in the firelight, circling his finger with the memory of home. And the sandals, the smallest gift, yet the most profound, turned bare survival into journey once more. The servants hesitated when the father said, "Kill the fatted calf," for it was the feast kept for holy days, for victories worth remembering. But the father's eyes left no room for question. "For this my son was dead and is alive again." His words filled the night, carried on the wind like an anthem to the unseen. Music followed, flute and drum and clapping hands, voices rising with the rhythm of grace rediscovered. The son sat at the long table, still dazed, watching light and laughter swirl around him as though he were both guest and ghost. The food before him felt unreal, a dream he feared to touch lest it vanish. His father sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching, saying little, just smiling with a weariness that looked like peace. The son wanted to speak, to thank him, to ask how forgiveness could move so fast, but the words stayed locked behind gratitude too large for sound. The servants served him as though he were royalty, and each act, each poured cup, each broken loaf, whispered, "You are home." Yet far beyond the house, at the edge of the fields where the music faintly trembled, another figure stood. The elder brother, returning from the day's work, heard the echoes of celebration and frowned. The rhythm of the drums, the laughter that spilled through the windows. It felt wrong to him, like joy misapplied. He called to a servant and asked what the noise meant. The servant smiled, eager to share the miracle. "Your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fatted calf." The words struck like a stone. For a moment, he said nothing, only stared toward the house glowing against the dusk. Then, slowly, the quiet inside him hardened. He turned away, the joy of others clanging like insult in his chest. Years of obedience, uncelebrated, years of work, unquestioned. And now the squanderer returns, and they feast. He walked a little way down the road, away from the lights, his thoughts cold and sharp. He could still hear faint laughter, his father's voice, full of life in a way it had not been for years, and something inside him ached, not with loss, but with a justice he could not untangle from pride. A shadow of envy whispered, "Why should mercy taste sweeter than loyalty?" He clenched his fists, the dirt of honest labor still on his hands, and waited in the dark as though righteousness could outstare grace. Inside, the celebration reached its height. the air thick with music and light. The younger son looked once toward the window, sensing some unfinished story beyond the glow. But the father's voice called him back. "Eat, my son. The night is short and love is long." The boy smiled faintly and obeyed, unaware that love, like light, must sometimes walk beyond its own walls to be understood. The night deepened, and laughter from the feast spilled out through the open windows, mingling with the scent of roasted grain and sweet wine. Music wove through the courtyard like threads of light. Yet beyond its reach, at the far edge of the fields, stood the elder son, unmoving. The stars began to appear, one by one, distant witnesses to an old struggle reborn. He heard the sound of his father's joy echoing across the land he had worked with faithful hands. Fields plowed in heat and in storm, every furrow a silent promise of duty kept. That laughter stung him now like salt upon a wound he did not know he carried. He had never left, never demanded, never wasted. Yet the house, the music, the feast, they had never been for him. He felt the weight of years pressed into his shoulders, the quiet ache of being unseen by the love he had served. He told himself he was not angry, only just. But righteousness, when touched by resentment, turns bitter. He stayed in the dark, arms crossed, staring at the glow of torches flickering against the courtyard walls. And then he saw movement, the familiar figure of his father stepping out into the night, leaving the celebration behind. The old man's robe brushed the grass as he walked, the light from the doorway fading behind him, his face illuminated only by moonlight. The father's steps were slow but sure, as though this too had been a journey long expected. When he reached his eldest, he stopped a few paces away and said softly, "My son, come inside. Your brother is home." The elder's jaw tightened. "Your son," he said, voice low, trembling with what he wouldn't call pain. "Your son wasted everything. Our inheritance, your years, your honor, and you welcome him with celebration? You never once gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends." The words poured out, not measured, not rehearsed, but torn from a place too long restrained. The father listened, head bowed slightly, his silence not of argument, but of grief. When the outburst ended, he took a step closer. "My child," he said, his voice breaking gently over the words, "you are always with me, and all that I have is yours." The elder looked away, unable to meet the eyes that had waited at the same gate for both sons in different ways. "Then why celebrate him?" he whispered. The father smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes only through pain endured and love undefeated, because he was lost and is found, because joy belongs not to those who deserve it, but to those who need it. The wind moved through the field, stirring the dry grass around them. For a long while, neither spoke. The elder's anger began to waver beneath the weight of his father's calm. He had imagined this moment as battle. Instead, it felt like surrender. The father reached out a hand and placed it on his son's shoulder, the gesture steady, unjudging. "Come," he said again. "There is music waiting for you too." The elder hesitated, torn between pride and longing. He looked toward the house, light still pulsing through the doorway, the hum of life inside. And for a heartbeat, the years of distance between obedience and love collapsed. He exhaled slowly, and though his feet did not yet move, something within him did. The father did not press him. He only stood beside him in silence, gazing toward the horizon where another dawn would rise. for love knows that patience is sometimes its truest language. Inside, the music softened, as if even the instruments were listening for the sound of reconciliation. The night held its breath, waiting for a decision that would echo through the ages, whether duty would yield to mercy, and whether the house of love could contain both the lost and the faithful. For a long moment, the two figures stood in the field, one framed by the warmth of home behind him, the other still wrapped in the quiet chill of resentment. The moon had climbed higher now, pouring silver light over the earth as if heaven itself wished to soften their distance. The father's hand remained on his son's shoulder, unmoving, patient. The elder son's breath came slow, uneven. Beneath his pride, there was something deeper, an ache not for justice, but for recognition. All his life, he had served faithfully. Every harvest bore the mark of his diligence. Every servant knew his steady authority. He had done everything right, yet he had never felt celebrated. Watching his father embrace the one who had broken every promise reopened a wound he could never name. Am I loved or merely useful? The father seemed to read the thought in his silence. My son, he said softly, I see the weight you carry, though you never spoke it. You believed my love was earned by labor, but love cannot be measured by what it gains. It only multiplies by what it gives. The elder's eyes flickered, confused by tenderness that felt undeserved. Then why him? He murmured, almost childlike. He wounded you, shamed your name, and yet you ran to him. The father's gaze lifted to the stars. Because love runs faster than shame, he said. Because I waited too long not to run. Because mercy, when withheld, dies in the heart that hoards it. The words lingered in the air between them. The wind moved softly through the field, and with it came the faint sound of laughter from the house, pure, alive, free of calculation. The father smiled at the sound. Listen, he said, that laughter is not against you. It is for all of us. Every note says, we are whole again. The elder lowered his head. Something inside him trembled, fragile as a flame caught in breath. He thought of the nights he had seen his father standing at the gate, looking down the road that led nowhere, waiting. He had assumed it was duty that kept the old man awake. Now he understood. It was love that refused to sleep. Tears gathered, uninvited, and he turned his face away. The father pretended not to notice, only tightening his hand slightly. Come home, my son, he said again. Not as the perfect one, but as the beloved one. The table is not full until you are there. Slowly, hesitantly, the elder began to move. The father walked beside him, neither leading nor following. The path between the field and the house seemed shorter than he remembered, as though forgiveness had bent space itself. As they drew closer, the light from the window spilled over them, golden and alive. The sound of the music swelled again, and when they reached the doorway, the younger son turned, his face radiant with humility, his eyes still red from tears. For a breath, time paused. The prodigal and the faithful, both standing before the same mercy. The father stepped aside, allowing the light to fall fully upon his eldest. The servants looked uncertain, unsure whether to bow or to wait. The elder met his brother's gaze, two worlds colliding in silence. Then, in a motion neither had planned, the elder reached out and placed a hand on the younger's shoulder. The contact was awkward, brief, but real. The younger trembled and whispered, "Brother," but the elder stopped him. "We were both lost," he said quietly. The younger's lips parted in surprise, and then he smiled through tears. The father's eyes shone with quiet joy as he gestured toward the table. "Now," he said, "we will eat together." The music rose again, softer this time, like a hymn. The servants refilled cups, the guests laughed, and the night, the same night that had once seemed divided between bitterness and joy, now glowed with something new, peace without conditions. Outside, the moon kept watch, and the wind carried the scent of bread and olive wood far into the sleeping valley. Somewhere in that breeze, even the silence seemed to sing, "The house is whole again." When the first laughter settled into murmurs and the music gentled to a low rhythm, the father rose from his place at the head of the table. The lamps threw soft halos on the walls. Smoke curled from the hearth, mingling with the scent of roasted grain and oil. He looked around the room, at his servants, smiling shyly, at neighbors, whispering stories that would travel the valley by morning, at his two sons seated side by side for the first time in years. The father lifted his cup, but did not drink. Instead, he spoke, not loudly, but in a voice that reached every corner. "Tonight," he said, "is not a night for boasting or forgetting. It is a night for remembering what love endures." The room quieted. Even the youngest servant paused in his motion, hands still hovering over the bread basket. The father's gaze moved between his sons, one still fragile from return, the other still uneasy with forgiveness. "You both know the fields," he began softly, "but not the waiting." His hands trembled slightly as he set the cup down. "When your brother left, the days did not stop. The sun rose, the work continued. The harvest came and went. But every evening I would stand at the gate, not to watch the road, at least not at first, but because I could not bear to sit inside. The silence there grew too loud. Every wind that passed carried the sound of his footsteps, or the echo of my own mistakes." He turned his eyes to the younger son, whose head lowered with shame. The father shook his head gently. "Do not bow, my son. The heart cannot wait without remembering its own wanderings. Every man, even one who stays, has known the country of distance." His gaze shifted to the elder son, whose eyes glistened but did not turn away. "You think I loved him more because I ran to him," the father said. "But I ran because love, when it sees the way open, must move. My waiting for you has been no less. The gate faces both roads." The elder frowned, uncertain. "You waited for me?" The father smiled. "Yes, though you never left. I waited for the day you would see that love is not a wage to be earned. That was your journey, and I could not walk it for you." The words fell over the room like gentle rain, soaking slowly into hearts too long sun-dried by pride and regret. The younger son covered his face, tears slipping through his fingers. The elder reached for his cup, but found his hands shaking. The father continued, his voice steady, calm. "I prayed that mercy would find him before despair did, and when I saw him coming over the hill, I did not think of what was spent or lost. I thought only of what was still alive." He paused, letting the fire crackle between his words. "Love," he said finally, "is not memory, it is resurrection. It brings the dead back into the living." The guests murmured softly, moved by something beyond understanding. The father turned toward the doorway, where the night waited beyond the lamplight. "And now," he said, "we are whole again, though we were never truly divided. For in the eyes of heaven, the found and the faithful are two notes of the same song. He sat down, and for a long while, no one spoke. The younger son leaned against his father's shoulder like a boy again. The elder rested his hands on the table, his chest rising and falling with a slow rhythm of surrender. Around them, the candles flickered, casting gentle shadows that danced like angels in quiet joy. Outside, the fields lay still under the moonlight. Somewhere far off, a night bird called once and was silent. The feast continued, but the sound had changed. Less celebration now, more gratitude. Each heartbeat at that table was a prayer. Thank you for finding what was lost. When the feast had quieted and the lamps burned low, the younger son slipped quietly from the table and stepped into the night. The air outside was cool and smelled of olive and earth after fire. Crickets sang softly in the grass, and the stars spread wide above him like a mercy too large for measure. He walked beyond the courtyard where laughter still echoed faintly, past the gate where his father had once waited, and out into the open fields where silence grew thick as memory. Every step stirred the dust that had known his father's feet, the same dust that had swallowed his pride and now received his peace. He stopped at the old fig tree near the boundary wall, the place where he and his brother had played as children, climbing its branches to look at the road beyond. He reached out and touched the trunk, rough under his palm, warm from the day's sun. How many evenings had his father stood here, looking toward the horizon that now lay behind him? He turned toward the faint line of hills and saw in his mind the long path he had walked, the city's lights fading, the nights of hunger, the smell of swine, the prayer that had broken through despair. He sank to his knees and pressed his hands into the soil, whispering, "You found me, even when I ran from being found." The wind moved through the grass like a voice answering softly. He closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his lids, images flickered. His father running, arms outstretched, the dust rising between them. The moment of collision where shame met love and could not stand. He had thought that returning home would end the journey, but now he saw that the journey had only changed direction. It no longer led outward into the world. It led inward, into the heart that still struggled to believe it was forgiven. He remembered his father's words at the table. Love is not memory, it is resurrection. And he wondered if resurrection was not a single miracle, but the daily act of breathing again after despair. He whispered, "How do I live forgiven?" The wind whispered back, bending the grass, "By forgiving yourself." He wept then, not the loud, shattering tears of regret, but the quiet tears of release, the kind that wash not what is seen, but what is unseen. His shoulders shook as the weight he had carried, the invisible one, heavier than hunger, slipped away at last. When he looked up, the stars seemed nearer, as if heaven had bent down to listen. He rose slowly, his knees stiff, and stood beneath the vastness of the sky. The moon hung above the hills, pale and unblinking, the same moon that had watched his fall and his return. He thought of his brother then, of the distance that still lingered, thin but real, and he felt a tenderness that surprised him. He never left, he whispered, but maybe he was lost too. The thought carried no bitterness, only understanding. He turned back toward the house where faint music still drifted, slower now, like a heartbeat winding down to rest. The lamps glowed softly through the windows, golden against the dark. It looked different tonight. not merely a house of stone and beam, but a living thing, breathing, pulsing with forgiveness. As he walked toward it, his shadow fell before him, long and dark across the path. He stopped and looked at it, the outline of the man he had been, and smiled. "You can come too," he said quietly, and kept walking. At the gate, he paused again. The old hinges creaked as he touched them, and he felt the smoothness of the wood beneath his fingers. How many times had these gates opened for others, while remaining closed for him by choice? He pushed gently, and they yielded at once. The house welcomed him, not with fanfare but with warmth. The low hum of voices, the flicker of firelight, the steady rhythm of belonging. He stepped inside, closed the gate behind him, and whispered, "I'm home." In the fields beyond, the wind kept singing, a soft refrain that rose and fell with the night. Found, found, found. Sleep eluded the elder son. Even after the music faded and the lamps dimmed, the stillness of night pressed against him like a hand upon his chest. He rose quietly from his bed, careful not to wake the servants nearby, and stepped out into the courtyard. The air was cool and silvered with moonlight. The scent of bread lingered faintly, mingled with smoke and the sweetness of oil lamps now guttering low. He walked past the tables, still cluttered with the remains of the feast, cups overturned, crumbs scattered, echoes of laughter fading into memory. Each trace of joy felt both near and distant, like the aftertaste of a dream he wasn't sure he'd shared. He moved toward the fields, where silence waited. The ground was soft from the dew, and his sandals left clear prints behind him. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow's work or the measure of yield and labor. Instead, he felt something shifting, unsteady, unfamiliar. He stopped by the fig tree near the wall, the same where his brother had knelt earlier, though he didn't know it. He looked up at the stars and thought of the words his father had spoken. "You're always with me, and all I have is yours." The phrase returned again and again, like a melody he couldn't decide whether to love or resist. He whispered, "If all is mine, why do I still feel empty?" The question dissolved into the night. The silence answered with a kind of compassion that frightened him. It was easier to live by duty, to measure worth in work, than to stand bare before a love that asked for nothing. He realized with a start that he had never truly understood his father. He had obeyed him, yes, perfectly, but he had never known him. Service had become his shelter, righteousness his armor, and now, seeing mercy in motion, he felt exposed. He knelt beside the fig tree, resting his hands on the soil. The earth was warm beneath the cool surface. He remembered being a boy, his father's laughter when he learned to plow straight rows, the pride that came with each task well done. Somewhere along the way, love had become performance. He closed his eyes, whispering, "Father, I never left you, but maybe I never stayed." The wind moved through the branches, stirring the leaves above him. The stars shifted subtly as if drawing closer. He thought of his brother's return, the broken figure on the road, the father's arms running to meet him, and for the first time, he saw beauty instead of offense. What had seemed injustice now looked like miracle. The lost was found, the dead breathed again. And what greater gift could there be than to live in a house where resurrection was real? He stayed there for a long time, until the ache in his chest softened into something tender. When he finally rose, he looked toward the house. Its windows glowed faintly still, the last candles keeping vigil. He took a slow breath and began to walk back, his steps steady, unhurried. At the threshold, he paused and looked inside. His father sat by the hearth, half asleep, one hand resting on the table. For a moment, the son simply watched him, the lines of his face softened by peace. The years of waiting turned into quiet rest. The elder son whispered, "Thank you for waiting for both of us." Then he stepped fully inside, closed the door behind him, and the sound was soft as forgiveness. The night settled. In the fields beyond, the fig leaves stirred once more, and the stars, witnesses to both wanderings, shone brighter for having seen two sons find their way home. Dawn rose gently over the valley, spilling slow gold across the fields and rooftops. The world seemed to exhale after a long night of holding its breath. The father woke before the household stirred, as he always had, and dressed quietly, his movements steady with years of ritual. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, and the air was cool, tinged with the scent of ash and dew. He stepped outside, the wooden door sighing softly behind him. The first light touched the olive trees, setting their silver leaves aglow. The father breathed in the stillness, the rare calm after storm, and began his walk through the fields. The earth was damp beneath his sandals, the soil dark and rich, life reborn in the tracks of last night's celebration. He ran his fingers over the wheat stalks, feeling their promise. The world had not changed, yet everything felt different. Lighter, whole, he looked toward the horizon, where two roads met at the edge of his land. One led to the distant city, the other into the quiet hills. Both had been roads of loss once. Now, there were roads of grace. He smiled faintly, whispering, "Let them lead where they will. They all come home in time." As he walked, he thought of his sons, the younger, still sleeping, perhaps dreaming of the road that had brought him back. The elder, steady, silent, his heart finally softening. He loved them differently, but not unequally. Each had taught him something love itself needed to remember, that mercy must bend to meet the broken, and patience must hold space for the proud. He stopped near the fig tree, the one that had watched both boys find their reckonings beneath its shade. Its leaves shimmered in the soft wind, each movement catching a glint of morning light. He laid his hand on the trunk and said quietly, "You have seen my waiting, haven't you? And now you see my peace." For the moment, the wind stilled completely, as if the earth itself paused to listen. The father closed his eyes and prayed, not with words, but with gratitude. When he opened them again, he saw the outline of his home, bathed in gold. Smoke rose gently from the chimney. The world smelled of bread and beginning. He thought of the inheritance he had once divided, the silver, the land, the herds, all those tangible things that had seemed to matter. How small they felt now. The true inheritance was not what had been given, but what had been kept. Love that endured both rebellion and resentment and came out stronger. That was the wealth neither distance nor jealousy could diminish. He turned back toward the house, his steps slow, savoring the quiet. Birds began to stir in the branches above, calling to one another as if announcing resurrection itself. He smiled at the sound. "Yes," he said softly, "sing. The world is made new." As he approached the courtyard, the doors creaked open and the servant stepped out, surprised to see him awake so early. "Master, shall I prepare the morning meal?" the young man asked. The father nodded, then added, "But not just for me. Let it be for all. Today we eat as one family." The servant bowed and hurried off, and the father lingered at the gate for a final moment, looking once more at the path stretching into the distance. The road shimmered faintly in the morning light, and he knew that somewhere, beyond sight, others were still walking. The lost, the weary, the searching. He smiled gently and whispered, "May they find their way home too." Then he turned, and the sun rose higher, washing the valley in brilliance. Behind him, the open gate swayed in the wind, as if to say, "Love still waits." The morning sunlight found the younger son long before he woke. It slipped through the lattice of the window, warm and soft, falling across his face like a gentle hand that knew him. He stirred, disoriented for a moment, caught between the dream of yesterday and the truth of now. The bed beneath him was simple, the sheets coarse but clean, and the air smelled of bread baking somewhere in the courtyard. For a moment, he lay still, listening to the soft hum of voices outside, to the coo of doves upon the roof, to the quietness that felt like mercy itself. When he rose, his legs were unsteady, his body remembering the long hunger that the feast had only begun to heal. He washed his face in the basin by the window, watching the water ripple with each movement. The reflection that looked back at him was strange, older than he remembered, gentler too. Not the reckless youth who had left, nor the hollow man who had knelt among the swine, but something in between, a soul being remade. He stepped outside into the courtyard. The light was golden, alive, turning the dust into glittering air. Servants moved about their work, nodding to him with shy respect. He bowed his head slightly in return, uncertain how to meet their eyes. Some of them had likely been here when he left, had seen his father's sorrow, had heard the whispers that followed. Yet there was no judgment in their glances now, only quiet welcome. He crossed the courtyard, drawn by the sound of birds and the distant rustle of the fields. As he passed the kitchen, a servant pressed a small loaf into his hands without a word. He smiled faintly, murmuring thanks, and continued walking. The road beyond the house was lined with olive trees, their leaves whispering secrets to the morning wind. Ahead, he saw his father in the distance, walking slowly through the field, his robe brushed by wheat and sunlight. The sun hesitated, his heart tightening. There was love between them now, but also awe, a reverence that made him feel small, though not in shame. He walked forward, slower than he intended, until his father turned and saw him. The older man's smile was simple, steady, like the earth itself saying, "Welcome." "You're awake early," the father said as they met halfway. "I couldn't sleep," the son admitted. "The morning feels different." The father nodded, looking out over the field. The world always looks different when you've learned to see it again. They walked together in silence for a while, the wheat brushing against their hands. The son finally said, "I don't know how to begin again." "You already have," the father replied. Coming home was not the end of your repentance. It was the beginning of your gratitude. The son frowned slightly. "Gratitude?" The father looked at him, eyes calm and kind. "Repentance is what turns you toward home. Gratitude is what keeps you there." The words settled deep, slow as roots taking hold. The son felt them echo through every quiet corner of his soul. They walked on, neither hurrying nor speaking further, just breathing the same air, letting the rhythm of life between them mend what still lingered undone. After some time, the father knelt and pulled a handful of soil into his palm. "This is the land you left," he said softly. "But it never left you. I tended it while you were gone, and now it will feed you again." He pressed the soil into his son's hands. "Remember this feeling, how the earth gives without asking why." The son closed his fingers around the soil, feeling its coolness, its texture. It was rough, imperfect, alive. He nodded slowly, and for the first time since returning, he smiled, not through tears, but through peace. "I will," he said. Together they turned back toward the house, the morning sun lifting fully above them, washing their shadows into the earth. Behind them, the wind carried the faintest murmur of the sea far beyond the hills, as though even the horizon was whispering the same truth. What was lost has learned to live again. By midday, the light had softened into warmth that wrapped the valley like an embrace. The father and the younger son returned to the shade of the olive trees, where a low wooden table had been set by the servants. Bread, olives, figs, and a pitcher of cool water. The scent of the fruit trees drifted through the air, mingling with the hum of insects and the far-off bleating of sheep. The father sat first, lowering himself slowly, the years of labor showing in his movement. The younger son sat across from him, still clutching the memory of soil between his palms, as if it was something sacred. A shadow moved at the edge of the field, and both looked up. The elder son was approaching, a basket balanced on his shoulder, its weight shifting with each step. His eyes met his father's from a distance. The old man's gaze was gentle, unassuming, as though asking nothing more than presence. The elder hesitated for a heartbeat, then came closer, setting the basket down between them. "I brought figs," he said, his tone quiet but free of bitterness. "They're from the southern grove. They ripened early this year." The father smiled. Then mercy came early too. The elder son gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh, the kind that slips out when a wall begins to crumble. He sat down beside them. The silence that followed was not awkward, it was full. The three men ate slowly, their movements unhurried, their breaths sinking with the rhythm of the wind in the branches. After a while, the younger son said softly, "I still don't understand how you waited for me." The father looked at him, his face lit with sunlight and shadow. Waiting is what love does when it cannot go. The elder listened, his hands resting on the table. "And what about those who never left?" he asked quietly, the question more reflection than resentment. The father's eyes turned to him. "They are the ones who must learn to rejoice. Love that never had to search still has to open its hands." The elder nodded slowly, letting the words settle. For the first time, he reached for one of the figs and broke it in half, offering the piece to his brother. The younger hesitated, then accepted. It was a small thing, but the moment shimmered like sunlight through branches, the beginning of a language only forgiveness speaks. They ate together in peace. The breeze shifted, carrying the hum of bees and the whisper of distant water. A shepherd's call echoed faintly from beyond the hills. The father leaned back against the tree, closing his eyes, listening to the sounds of his world restored. "I once thought wealth was what I could divide," he said softly. "Now I see it's what cannot be divided. Love isn't smaller for being shared. It grows only in the giving." Neither son spoke, but both understood. The younger's hand rested over his heart. The elder's gaze softened, no longer drawn to what had been lost, but to what remained. They sat until the shadows lengthened, the olives gleaming dark against the wooden bowl. The father dozed for a moment, his breathing slow and even. The younger watched him and whispered, "He's still strong." The elder smiled faintly. "He's always been strong, just not in the way I used to think." When the father stirred and opened his eyes, the two sons were smiling at each other, tentative, awkward, but real. The sight made the old man's heart swell with quiet joy. As the sun dipped lower, turning the fields to gold, the father whispered, "This is the inheritance I meant for you both, not silver or land, this table." And there beneath the olive trees, with the hum of life all around them, the three sat together, no longer master and sons, no longer sinner and saint, but a family made whole again by the endless patience of love. The day faded slowly into evening, the first stars trembling in the pale blue sky. Somewhere far away, a traveler might have seen a small house glowing with warmth in the twilight, never knowing that within its walls, heaven had quietly touched the earth. Night returned with a slow grace, spreading over the valley like a great dark wing. The feast of the day had ended. The household lay quiet, the air heavy with the scent of olive and earth cooling after sun. Inside the house, both sons slept, the younger in the room he had once abandoned, the elder in the one that had always been his. But the father did not sleep. He rose from his bed before the lamps went out, drew his cloak about his shoulders, and stepped outside beneath the stars. The courtyard was still warm from the day. The ashes in the hearth glowed faintly, like memories that refused to die. The father crossed to the gate and leaned upon it, gazing out at the road. The same road where he had once waited in grief and where, not long ago, he had run in joy. It looked different now, gentler somehow, though the dust and stone were unchanged. He smiled faintly. Perhaps it was not the road that had changed, but the eyes that saw it. The wind moved softly through the olive branches, whispering the sound of old prayers. The father closed his eyes and listened. He thought of the long years of silence when the house had felt like half a heart, of the nights when he would stand in this very spot listening for footsteps that never came. There had been times he nearly gave up hope, when even faith felt like an ache rather than a promise. But still, each morning he had risen and looked east. Waiting, he realized, was not idleness. It was love refusing to stop believing. He remembered the moment he saw his son cresting the hill. Thin, filthy, half a ghost. Something ancient had moved in him then, something deeper than thought. He had not planned to run. His body had simply known what his soul had prayed for, to close the distance, before shame could speak. He had felt the wind against his face, the pain in his knees, the rush of breath that was half sob, half laughter. That run had been more than motion. It had been resurrection itself. He opened his eyes and looked toward the fig tree silhouetted against the stars. He could almost see his sons beneath it, the younger kneeling in repentance, the elder wrestling with his pride. Both journeys had passed through that place of stillness. Both had ended in mercy. He whispered, "We were both found by the same love." A soft sound broke the quiet. From the doorway came the elder son, still dressed, his eyes heavy with sleeplessness. "Father," he said quietly, "you're awake?" The old man nodded. "The night keeps company with those who remember." The elder hesitated, then stepped closer. "I wanted to thank you for coming after me too." The father smiled. "You think I could have stayed inside while my son stood in the dark?" The elder lowered his head. "I didn't know you saw me. I saw your shadow long before you knew you'd left the light, the father said gently. And I waited, just as I did for him. They stood together in silence. Above them, the stars pulsed softly, ancient witnesses to forgiveness rediscovered. The elder's eyes lifted toward them. I used to think mercy made you weak, he admitted. Now I see it's the only thing strong enough to keep love alive. The father's hand found his shoulder, resting there with the weight of pride and tenderness. Then you've learned what I prayed you would. From inside the house came a faint noise, perhaps the younger son turning in sleep, murmuring some fragment of a dream. The father smiled. He'll wake different tomorrow, he said softly. So will we all. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest smell of the sea far beyond the hills. The fader inhaled deeply, eyes half closed. Mercy, he whispered, changes everything it touches. The elder looked at him. Even those who think they need none, especially them, the father said, and his laughter broke the stillness. Low, gentle, like a river finding its voice again after years underground. They stood there until the night thinned with the promise of dawn. The stars dimmed, one by one, and the horizon began to blush with light. The father turned toward the house, placing a hand on the gate before he went in. Come, my son. The day waits for those who remember. Together, they stepped inside, the sound of their footsteps mingling with the waking birds. And behind them, the gate creaked softly in the wind, as if even the wood itself had learned to sing of forgiveness. Morning came soft and golden, spilling through the shutters in quiet stripes of light. The house stirred gently to life, the clatter of clay jars, the low murmur of servants greeting one another, the smell of bread rising again from the hearth. The father sat in the courtyard beneath the fig tree, his eyes half closed, his thoughts still drifting between prayer and memory. When he heard footsteps approaching, he opened them to see both sons coming toward him, side by side, silent but steady. The younger walked slower, still cautious, uncertain of his place beyond forgiveness. The elder's pace was deliberate, not hurried, as if he too were learning a new rhythm, one less about work and more about belonging. When they reached their father, both paused, unsure who should speak first. The father spared them the burden of choosing. Come, he said, petting the stone bench beside him. The day will wait for us. They sat, three figures framed in the light, each carrying a different history of the same love. For a long while, they said nothing. The father watched a bird hop along the wall, its feathers bright against the morning sun. You hear that? He asked softly. It sings not because it knows the words, but because it is alive. The elder smiled faintly. I used to think singing was for those who had reason to celebrate. And now? The father asked. Now I think it's for those who survived what should have silenced them. The father nodded slowly, eyes glistening. Then sing in your work today, both of you. He rose and handed them each a staff, not as command, but as gift. The land has been waiting for your feet to walk it together again. The two brothers exchanged glances, tentative, searching. The elder extended a hand first. The younger hesitated, then grasped it. Their fingers met, not firm, not formal, but real. The father smiled and turned toward the fields. The earth was radiant in the light, each blade of wheat catching the shimmer of dew. As they walked out together, the ground seemed to hum beneath them, a low vibration of renewal. the soil remembering the footsteps of reconciliation. The day unfolded quietly. They worked without words, sowing seed, mending fences, sharing water from the same flask. Now and then, their eyes met, and something like laughter would flicker and vanish, uncertain but growing. The father watched them from a distance, leaning on his staff. His heart swelled with a peace he had not known since youth. Not the loud peace of triumph, but a soft one that follows surrender. By midday, the brothers rested beneath the olive trees. The elder wiped sweat from his brow. "The work feels lighter today," he said. The younger smiled. "Maybe because we're carrying it together." They looked toward the house, its walls white against the blue sky. Smoke rose from the chimney, the smell of bread drifting toward them again. The younger said quietly, "I thought coming home would make me small, but it's made the world bigger." "And I thought staying meant strength," the elder replied. "But I see now. It only made me safe." The father approached, hearing their words, and sat with them in the shade. "Safety without love is only another kind of exile," he said. "You both have come home in your own ways." They ate their midday meal together, bread, figs, and water cool from the well. The father tore the bread into 3 pieces and handed one to each of them. "This," he said, "is the daily feast, not of plenty, but of peace." The younger looked at the bread in his hands, then at his father. "I'll never be able to repay you." The father shook his head. "Love does not keep accounts." The elder smiled quietly. "Then there is more wealth here than I ever thought." The father laughed, his voice deep and warm. "Now you see what I've been guarding all along." They finished their meal in silence, the wind stirring softly through the branches above. The valley stretched wide before them. The same earth, the same sky, yet new again because love had tilled it with mercy. As the afternoon light shifted, the father closed his eyes for a moment, resting against the tree. "When I am gone," he said, "keep this peace alive. Let it outlive my name." Both sons nodded, the weight of promise sitting gently between them. And for the first time since their youth, the 3 of them laughed together, quiet, real, unforced, as the wind carried their voices over the rippling fields. Evening came slowly, like a tired traveler unwilling to end the day. The sky burned gold and crimson over the western hills, and the shadows of the olive trees stretched long across the field. The father had gone ahead to the house to prepare for rest, leaving his sons still seated beneath the tree where they had shared their meal. The warmth of the sun lingered on the earth, and the air was heavy with the scent of wheat and wild thyme. Neither spoke for a time. They simply watched the light fade, as if both knew this silence was not emptiness, but invitation. At last, the younger son spoke, his voice low and uncertain. "There's something I never said," he began, staring at the dust between his sandals. "When I left, I thought I was strong. I thought the world owed me something for being alive, but the truth is, I left because I was afraid." The elder looked at him, frowning gently. "Afraid? Of what?" "Of being nothing," the younger said. "Of growing old in the same place. Of being known but never seen. I thought if I could make myself my own man, maybe I'd finally matter." He laughed softly, bitterly. "But the further I went, the smaller I became." The elder studied him for a long moment, then looked toward the horizon where the sun was dying behind the hills. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to envy you. The younger turned in surprise. "You? Envy me?" The elder nodded. "You had the courage to go. I never did. I told myself it was loyalty, but maybe it was fear too. Fear of failing, fear of losing what I already had. I stayed here thinking obedience would make me loved, but it only made me tired." The two brothers fell silent again, the confession between them heavy but clean. Like rain after drought, crickets began to sing, their song filling the pauses between words. The younger leaned back against the tree, closing his eyes. "So we were both lost," he murmured. "Yes," the elder said softly, "just in different directions." They both laughed then, quietly, gently, because there was truth in it that no longer hurt. The younger opened his eyes and looked at his brother. "Do you ever wonder what Father saw in us that made him wait?" The elder thought for a while before answering. "Maybe he didn't wait for what we were," he said. "Maybe he waited for what love would make us become." The words hung in the air, shimmering like light on water. The younger nodded slowly. Then he never waited in vain. They sat until the last of the sunlight was gone, and the first stars blinked awake. A lantern flickered in the distance, the father standing at the doorway, holding it high. "He's calling us in," the elder said. The younger smiled faintly. "He's always calling us in." They rose together and began the walk back. The path was narrow, and the light from the lantern stretched long across the ground. Halfway home, the elder said, "When I saw you walking down that road that day, I didn't recognize you. You looked broken." "I was," the younger admitted. "But now I think being broken was the only way to be whole again." The elder's hand brushed his shoulder as they walked. "Then maybe we both needed breaking." Ahead of them, their father waited with the lantern raised, his face glowing in the warm light. When they reached him, he said nothing, just smiled and stepped aside so they could pass through first. Inside, the table had been set again. Nothing grand, just bread, cheese, and wine. The father placed the lantern in the center, and its flame flickered softly against their faces. "Eat," he said, "and rest. Tomorrow we'll ask for new strength, but tonight belongs to peace." The younger broke the bread and handed a piece to his brother. The elder did the same for him. The father watched, silent, his eyes bright. And so, beneath the humble roof of that small house, the three of them ate together as the night deepened, no longer bound by what had been lost, but by what had been found. Outside, the valley breathed in the dark, and the stars trembled over the quiet house like witnesses to something eternal. Mercy, having done its work, settled gently over them all. Time moved softly through the seasons, like a stream that forgets it is flowing. The valley ripened with life. Harvests came and went. Rains fell and returned. And the days slipped by with the steady rhythm of peace restored. Yet within the quiet harmony of the household, a new stillness began to grow. One not of distance, but of time. The father, once strong as the fig tree's roots, began to slow. His steps grew measured, his breath shorter. The years had always been kind to his spirit, but now they began to claim his strength. He did not complain. Age, to him, was not a thief, but a teacher. He often sat beneath the olive trees at dawn, watching his sons work in the fields together. One steady, one thoughtful. Both changed. Their laughter, though rare, had become easy. Their silences, though deep, were no longer cold. He would smile quietly to himself and whisper, "This is what waiting was for." One morning, As the mist lifted from the valley, the younger son came to him carrying a small jug of water. "Drink, father," he said gently. "You've been sitting here since before the sun." The old man accepted the jug, his hands trembling slightly. He drank, then looked up at his son with a smile. "You always bring me water. You used to bring me worry." The younger laughed softly, kneeling beside him. "Maybe this is how I return what I took." "You've already returned more than you ever took," the father said. His eyes wandered toward the horizon. "Do you see those hills?" "Yes," the son said. "I used to think the world waited for me out there." The father nodded. "And now?" "Now I think it waited for me here." The father's hand rested on his son's shoulder. "Then you've learned what took me a lifetime to understand. That love is the only world worth coming back to." They sat in silence for a while, the sound of the fields drifting faintly in the breeze. In the distance, the elder son was working with the laborers, his movements steady and sure. The father watched him with pride. "He's learned to lead without needing to rule," he said quietly. "He carries the land as if it were heart, not property." The younger smiled. "He's gentler now. Sometimes I catch him praying in the fields." The father chuckled. "Then mercy has finished its work." The younger turned to him, seeing the faint tremor in his hands, the thinness of his breath. "You should rest more." The father shook his head. "Rest is for those who finished their waiting. I still wait, though now not for sons, but for the one who waits for me." The words fell softly, like petals in wind. The son lowered his gaze, his throat tightening. "You mean?" The father smiled faintly. "Don't grieve, my son. Every life is a circle of returning. I've lived long enough to see my home restored. What more could heaven owe me?" That evening, the family gathered for supper beneath the fig tree, the same place where the brothers had reconciled. The father spoke little, his voice weak but clear. He asked his sons to sit beside him. "Do you remember," he said, "the day I divided my inheritance?" The elder nodded. "We've both remembered it every day." The father smiled. "Then hear me once more. There's one portion I kept hidden, not gold, not land. It is the blessing that cannot be spent." He took their hands, one in each of his own, and joined them together. "This is it," he whispered. "My true inheritance, unity. Keep it, guard it. Let no pride break it again. Let my house never be divided, even when I am gone." The brothers looked at each other through tears. The elder clasped his brother's hand firmly. "We will," he said. The father exhaled slowly, the last light of sunset touching his face. "Then, my waiting ends in peace." They sat with him until night fell, the stars flickering above like eyes of eternity. The father drifted into sleep, and the brothers kept watch. Two silhouettes beneath the fig tree, the same tree that had once marked their distance, now standing as witness to their bond. In the house behind them, the lamps flickered. The night was quiet, yet alive with unseen presence, as if heaven itself drew near to listen. The old man slept deeply, his breathing soft, his face calm, the peace of one who had found his way home long before his final journey began. The father's days grew shorter in steps, but longer in peace. The fields no longer called for him, yet he still rose with the dawn, sitting by the window as the first light touched the hills. His eyes, though dimmer now, carried the same brightness they had held when watching for his lost son's return. Each morning, his sons would take turns sitting beside him, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent, just keeping him company as the house and valley woke to life. He no longer spoke much of the past, but when he did, his words carried the stillness of someone who had made peace with every memory. "When you are young," he told them one morning, "you think love is something you must earn. When you're old, you see it was always there, waiting for you to stop running." The younger son, who had once run farthest, nodded quietly. He had begun tending the fields more gently, planting slower but deeper. The soil seemed to respond to him, as if recognizing something changed in the hands that now worked it. The elder son managed the estate with care, but no longer as a man guarding what was his. He had learned to measure wealth not in herds or harvests, but in harmony. Together, they had turned the father's house into a place of quiet blessing, a home where travelers were welcomed, strangers fed, and the poor never turned away. The father's mercy had multiplied. As the months passed, the father's strength waned further. His steps faltered. His breath came shorter. He spent more time beneath the fig tree, the one that had watched over every season of his family's story. Its roots were deep, its shade wide. The brothers built a small bench there so he could rest in comfort. One afternoon, as the wind carried the scent of ripening figs, the father called his sons to him. When they came, he smiled faintly. "My eyes have seen all I prayed for," he said. Two sons, sitting side by side, not as rivals, but as brothers. The gate is open, the table full, and the house whole. What else could a father ask? The elder knelt beside him. "Ask that we remain as you taught us." The father reached out, placing a trembling hand on each of their faces. "Then listen to this. Do not live trying to deserve love. Live to become it. Let mercy be your inheritance, and the world will never run out of a home." The younger bowed his head, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. "You are mercy, Father. You are the proof of it." The old man smiled. "No, my son. I was only the gate. Love is the one who waited." A breeze passed through the fig leaves, rustling like a soft hymn. The father leaned back, his eyes drifting toward the horizon where the light began to dim. "The same light that set upon me," he whispered, "will rise for you." That evening, as dusk gathered, he called for a final meal. Bread, figs, and a cup of wine. He blessed the bread and broke it with his sons, his hands steady despite their frailty. "We began with division," he said, "and end with sharing. Let that be your remembrance of me." When night fell, he asked to be left beneath the fig tree, where the stars could keep watch. The brothers sat nearby, one on each side, holding his hands. His breathing slowed, steady, like a prayer folding into silence. His eyes turned upward toward the sky, where a single star burned bright. "There," he whispered, "home." And then his breath went out, soft as a sigh returning to its source. The brothers didn't move for a long time. The night held them in stillness, the fig leaves whispering, the stars trembling, the world reverent in its quiet. The elder reached out, closing his father's eyes. "He's gone home," he said. The younger looked toward the horizon, tears catching the moonlight. "No," he murmured. "He never left." They sat together until dawn came, the sky painted with light that seemed gentler than any before. The birds began to sing, and in their song, the brothers heard the echo of their father's laughter, alive, eternal, woven into the morning. The dawn that followed his passing was unlike any other. It came without fanfare, no wind, no cry of rooster, only a stillness that seemed to honor him. The brothers prepared his resting place beneath the fig tree. the tree that had grown through every season of their family story. Its roots reached deep into the same earth he had once tilled, its branches now heavy with fruit. The air was cool and fragrant. The valley seemed to hold its breath. The villagers came quietly, their steps soft against the morning dust. Some brought flowers, others bread or oil. No one spoke loudly. The father had been more than a man to them. He had been a kind of compass. His patience had steadied their quarrels. His generosity had fed their poor. Now they came not only to mourn, but to bear witness to the peace he had left behind. The elder son stood by the open earth, his hands clasped before him. The younger stood opposite, holding a small jug of water from the well. When the time came, the elder took a handful of soil and said, his voice trembling, "From this earth you came, and in this earth you taught us how to live." He let the soil fall gently over his father's still body. The younger stepped forward and poured the water slowly, whispering, "May this ground never thirst where you lie." Together they covered the grave, their movements slow, deliberate, each handful of soil an act of devotion. When they were done, they placed a single flat stone at the head, carved simply with his name and the word, "Mercy." Nothing else was needed. The people lingered for a while, praying silently, then drifted back toward the village. The brothers remained. The younger knelt beside the mound, pressing his palm to the soil. "He waited for us both," he said softly. The elder's voice was low but steady. "Now we wait for others." They stayed until the sun reached its height, then sat in the shade of the fig tree, listening to the hum of bees in the branches. For the first time since childhood, they began to speak openly, not about regret or guilt, but about what came next. "What will we do now?" the younger asked. The elder looked toward the house, its white walls gleaming in the sun. "We will keep it open," he said. "Not just for us, but for anyone who needs what he gave." "A home," the younger murmured. "A refuge," the elder added. "A place where mercy has a face." The younger smiled faintly, wiping his eyes. "Then his waiting continues. Through us." They rose and walked back toward the house, the wind behind them carrying the soft rustle of fig leaves. The road, once a path of exile, now felt like a bridge. Every step seemed blessed by memory, by purpose, by the echo of their father's voice saying, "You are both my sons. Carry my love forward." At the doorway, the younger paused and looked back once more at the grave beneath the tree. The sun had shifted, and light poured through the branches, illuminating the stone until it glowed faintly, as if touched by heaven. "He's not gone," he whispered. "He's just gone ahead." The elder nodded. "Then we walk after him." That night, as the valley slept, a breeze moved through the fig tree, scattering its leaves across the ground like blessings. And though no one saw it, the stars above the house seemed to burn a little brighter, as if the heavens themselves had stretched open to receive a father who had taught earth how to forgive. The days that followed their father's passing were strangely quiet. The house, once filled with his voice and laughter, now held an echo, a warmth that lingered without presence. Grief came not as thunder, but as mist, soft and constant. The brothers moved through it differently. The elder, slow and thoughtful, steadying the house with quiet hands. The younger, restless, rising early to walk the fields, as though seeking the breath that once filled them with meaning. One morning, as dawn stretched its pale light across the valley, the elder found his brother sitting beneath the fig tree. their father's resting place. The stone that bore his name glowed faintly in the sun, dew glistening like tears upon its surface. The younger held a handful of figs in his palm, untouched. "I keep thinking," he said softly, "that he'll walk out from the house again, that I'll look up and see him coming down the path, smiling like before." The elder sat beside him. "He still walks," he said, "just not where we can see." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the whisper of leaves above them. Finally, the younger said, "He told us to keep the house open." "Yes," the elder replied. "For all who wander." The younger looked toward the gate. "Then let's begin today." And so they did. That morning, they opened the doors of their father's house to the valley. They invited the hungry, the weary, the lost. Some were travelers, dusty from the road. Others were neighbors who had once whispered about the prodigal's shame, but now came in humility, seeking forgiveness of their own. The brothers offered bread and oil, water and rest. The house filled again, not with the laughter of one family, but with the heartbeat of mercy reborn. In time, word spread beyond the valley. Strangers came, farmers, widows, shepherds, even beggars from distant villages, each welcomed without question. No one was turned away. Those who arrived trembling with guilt left lighter, as if the air itself had forgiven them. The brothers never preached. They simply listened. And in their listening, people found something they had not known they needed. Understanding without judgment, grace without condition. The elder son became known as the keeper of peace. His calm steadiness grounded the home. His wisdom gave structure to its mercy. The younger, gentler now, was called the one who welcomes. Children loved him for his laughter. The broken loved him because his eyes saw them not as failures, but as stories still being written. Together, they became the living echo of their father's heart. Years passed, but the fig tree remained the same. Each season it bore fruit, its branches sheltering those who came to rest beneath it. Beneath those branches, countless stories unfolded of reconciliation, of healing, of faith restored. The stone at its roots, carved with the word mercy, never weathered. It seemed always new, as though heaven itself refreshed it each night. One evening, as twilight fell and the valley shimmered with the quiet of approaching night, the brothers stood side by side beneath that tree. The elder held a lantern, the younger a loaf of bread. The wind carried the scent of olives and dusk. The younger said softly, "Do you ever think he watches us?" The elder smiled. "I think mercy never stops watching." They placed the bread on the flat stone, breaking it in half, an offering not to the dead, but to the love that had outlived death. "For all who are lost," the younger whispered. "And for all who still wait to be found," said the elder. The lantern flame flickered, then steadied, casting their shadows long across the ground. Behind them, the house glowed with warm light, laughter drifting out through open doors. The valley had learned from one man's patience how to forgive, and from his son's how to continue it. That night, as the moon rose and touched the fig leaves with silver, the brothers sat beneath its branches once more, not as prodigal and faithful, but as one story joined in two hearts. And in the hush of that sacred evening, they both heard it, the faint sound of footsteps in the wind, running not away, but homeward. Years turned gently into decades, and the valley changed in ways only time understands. New homes rose from the earth, Children played where their fathers once worked, and generations passed like seasons in steady rhythm. Yet beneath the same enduring fig tree, the story remained alive. Its branches spread wider now, its roots deeper, anchoring more than soil. It held memory itself. The house of the father still stood, its walls patched and weathered, but its doors never closed. Travelers still came from distant lands, drawn by stories whispered from mouth to mouth, of two brothers reconciled, of a man who once ran down the road to embrace a son the world had called unworthy. The locals called it the House of Mercy. No one knew when that name began, but none questioned it. Inside, bread was always baking, oil always burning, and laughter always finding its way back after silence. The brothers grew old together, their hair silvering, their faces marked by peace. They worked less and listened more. Each evening they would sit beneath the fig tree, watching the road that wound through the valley, the same road that had once led one of them away and brought him home again. Sometimes a stranger would appear in the distance, limping or weary, and without needing to speak, both brothers would rise to meet them. It had become instinct now, mercy passed down through muscle and memory. When the elder's strength finally began to fade, the younger cared for him as gently as their father once had. "You've carried this house long enough," the younger said one night as they sat in the lamplight. The elder smiled. It was never a burden. It was a blessing that needed hands. And when the younger's time came, the elder stayed by his side, holding his hand through the final breath. "You found your way home," he whispered, "and you helped others find theirs." The younger's lips curved faintly. "We both did," he said. After their passing, the villagers buried them beside their father under the same fig tree. 3 stones stood in a line, one carved with mercy, one with faith, and one with return. The fig leaves above them never withered completely. Even in drought, they remained green. Generations later, children would gather there to hear the story retold, the tale of the father who ran, the sons who learned to love, and the house that refused to close its doors. Some would ask, "Did it truly happen?" And the elders would smile and answer, "It happens still, wherever forgiveness runs faster than pride." At dusk, when the valley glowed gold and the sky blushed with the last light of day, a hush would fall over the land. Those who listened closely swore they could still hear the faint echo of footsteps in the wind, running, always running, not away, but homeward. And so the story lived on, not in books, not in monuments, but in hearts that remembered what it meant to be found. Because love, once set in motion, never stops running.